because this is the reorganization meeting, it is my job to call this meeting to order. So I'll ask that we first please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, great, that man's gonna sell me one over there again. I was gonna say
Okay.
amen after that.
Have the gavel. Makes it official. Everybody loves it when I have the gavel. So our first order of business is to elect a chair for the joint board for the upcoming year. Per the board policy, the chair is from Northampton for this session. So are there any nominations for the chair of the joint board?
I will make a nomination.
Oh yeah, I've got it. I'm gonna move to nominate Daniel Strader to serve as the chair of the SAU 21 Joint School Board.
Okay, is there a second to that nomination?
There's Jill.
Okay.
Thanks, Danielle.
Yay!
Are there any other nominations?
Oh, you made it.
All right, seeing none, we have a motion to elect Danielle Strader as chair of the joint board.
I heard you.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Good luck.
That looks unanimous. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Jill, for last year. That was great. Oh, we need to appoint
Oh, I
vice
did not
chair.
introduce new members.
Oh yeah, you should
we should do
introduce.
that.
Yeah.
Do I know all the new members? Do I have
Well,
all?
we have two.
I know we have Wendy. Welcome, Wendy. Welcome. Yay.
And also with us is Desiree Potter, who's a new member from Winnipeg.
Congratulations. Anyone else? No. All
That's it.
familiar faces. All right, and we did the board chair. Oh, appointment of the board vice chair. I do that, right?
Yes, you have to call for nomination.
All right, I'd like to call for nominations for the vice chair for SAU 21 Joint School Board.
I would like to nominate Christina Kaiser from Seabrook.
And just to be clear, board policy is that Seabrook serves as the vice chair in this
Perfect.
upcoming year.
Okay. I'll second.
Any other nominations? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Hi.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Rhonda. We have the public comment open currently for anyone in the public that would like to speak.
Yes, and it'll be coming to this microphone.
To the microphone over here. That way.
I don't see anyone.
Okay. We leave it open for 30 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll leave that open for 30 minutes, starting the clock at 6:06, and then we'll come back if anyone comes in. We can always readdress. All right. Next is a presentation from the New Hampshire School Board Association.
Nice try. Northampton. So Barrett Christina, the Executive Director of the New Hampshire School Board Association, and Will Phillips, their staff attorney, are both here to present.
Welcome, welcome.
And we have, board members should have handouts at their places. Yes. If you didn't receive one, please let us know.
Good evening, and thank you again. Nice to see some familiar faces, and I believe, two new people. Congratulations on being elected to your local school board. Was it just last year that we did this as well too? The days and years kind of blend into each other these days, don't they? So, my name is Barrett Christina. I'm Executive Director of the New Hampshire School Boards Association. Will Phillips, our staff attorney. We want to thank you for inviting us back to give just sort of a brief overview of a couple various topics that are relative to school board governance. Will spoke with Superintendent Nato, I think earlier today or yesterday, and put together this packet. Meredith asked us to touch on, I think, maybe 3 or 4 sort of prime topics. We're going to rip through this because the reality is you're getting about 3 or 4 hours worth of training in about a half hour or so. And we'll try and leave some room for questions and answers as well too as we move along. So We're gonna go through the slides. I think there's about 17 or 18 slides. We're gonna try and get through that in about a half hour or so, and then open it up for questions. And if, just a quick plug, for the new school board members, you know, tonight is not obviously gonna be everything that you need to know about roles and responsibilities and school board governance. We have 2 webinars coming up on our new school board member orientation. The first is going to be Monday, April 10th, at I believe a 6 o'clock start time. You can register on our website if you have any questions, talk to Meredith or send myself or Will an email or call the office. And then we're doing a second session of that in May. I think it's May 2nd, but I don't have my calendar in front of me. It's the same program, so we offer it twice just for, we understand people have board meetings and soccer games and Little League games and things.
Sorry. I was trying to
things of that
silence.
nature, so. But anyway, we'd also encourage the newbies to take a look at our website, www.nhsba.org. We've got a lot of resources, gives a little bit more information about who we are and what we do. A lot of our training documents are on there. They're not password protected, so you can go on and download. If you have any questions about the association or what we do and the services we provide, by all means, feel free to call me at any time. So with that, I know our time is short, so I'm going to talk just a couple core principles as we get started. The first is collective authority, not individual authority. And then the second core principle we're going to talk about is governance, not management. So collective authority, whether or not you're at your joint SAU 21 school board or your individual local board in Northampton and Seabrook and Hampton Falls, or the Winnicott board, you can only act as an entity at a duly called meeting. The 5 of you or 7 of you get together at a duly called meeting where you deliberate, you put an agenda together, you have things that come before the board, policies, budget adoption, ratifying the collective bargaining agreement, reviewing reports from your administrators and your facilities, hearing an update from your superintendent. That is the school board as a collective entity doing its business. There's nothing in law, nothing in New Hampshire statute, nothing in Department of Education regulations that give individual school board members specific authority. There are some caveats to that, you know, no rules without its exceptions here or there, but the general aspect is that the board can only act as a collective body. There are some limited circumstances. We're going to talk about a bit about policy later on. Your board chair might have certain authorities to call the meeting to order, to consult with the superintendent in agenda setting, to be the spokesperson on behalf of the district with the media or the press. But that's going to be developed by local policy. And that's something, again, policy is the aspect that the board decides to do. Not a matter of law, not a matter of sort of general practice or whatnot. A board, as I mentioned, a board can delegate some authority to an individual member. And the only inherent authority an individual board member has is to attend the meeting and deliberate on vote on particular issues. The second aspect relative to governance, not management. The simplest way to put this, and the way the New Hampshire School Boards Association phrases it in the training that we provide, is that the board governs the school district and the superintendent with his or her, you know, administrative team manages the school district. Governance is sort of the 30,000-foot view, your policies, your budget, your collective bargaining, your goals and missions of the school board, your strategic planning. But the administration is with what? The day-to-day aspects, right? Making sure the buses are running and making sure that the boiler is working in the school, making sure payroll is met, making sure staff are evaluated and making sure that staff are following policies relative to students and curriculum and making sure that the daily operations of the school district are moving forward. And we know it in SAU 21, I say this respectfully, it's a kind of, SAU 21 is kind of an animal, isn't it? It's a large SAU, you've got a lot of, 5 towns. You know, we've got the co-op, we've got small schools, we've got large schools, and I'm sure Meredith is handling it appropriately. But governance, not management. The board governs the district, the superintendent manages the district. And we have a couple slides that lay out a couple examples. And one other saying, the the bullet point, I like this, I think Will came up with this a few years ago on slide 4. It's not the board's job to run the schools, but rather to see that they are run well. But examples of the difference in the interplay between governance and management. This is slide number 5 under fiscal responsibilities. Department of Education Rule 303.01, the school board shall adopt policies necessary and desirable to effectuate purchase of equipment, supplies, and services, so on and so forth. And also, the school board shall prepare an annual budget in accordance with RSA 32. Conversely, and related, not conversely, but related, the superintendent's responsibilities in the Department of Education rules. Superintendent is responsible for the selection and purchase of textbooks. How is that done, though? In accordance with school board policy, the magic language. We have a lot of Department of Education rules where it says the school board will adopt a policy on X, and then the corresponding superintendent rule from the Department of Education says that the superintendent shall do X in accordance with state law and local school board policy. You see that interplay throughout a lot of these Department of Education rules. Likely also, the superintendent is responsible for developing the recommended budget to the school board, for developing and recommending to the school board its annual budget in accordance with school board policy. So, but we highlight the fact that there's interplay between these two things. There aren't specific domains that the board does this and the superintendent does that. There has to be respect, understanding, working together, collaboration on all of these sorts of things. The next aspect, educational programming. Again, the difference and the interplay between the two domains. The school board, in consultation with the superintendent, shall determine the educational goals of the school district, and the school board shall require the implementation of educational programs. Correspondingly, the superintendent's rule, the superintendent is responsible for the development of the educational plan, including curriculum. Magic language back there at the end in bold, in accordance with local school board policy. Last example, personnel matters. The school board shall adopt policies necessary and desirable to control and effectuate the recruitment, employment, and evaluation and dismissal of teachers and other employees. Likewise, the superintendent, I imagine you're probably coming up on this at your local school board meetings either last week or next week. The superintendent nominates all certified staff and appoints other employees in accordance with state law and rules and local school board policies. I was misreading that. So that's the general interplay. There's another one on page 8, but just in the interest of time, I'll let you read that on your own. Another personnel interplay between sort of the two domains and whatnot. So I'm going to pass it off to Will now, I think. Yeah. Do a couple. Yep.
Good evening. I'm actually going to bring us back to that last slide because it segues into the next two components that we're dealing with. Wow, this is, I can either look up or look down. So the reason I separated this out, and Barrett was caught off guard because we used to have the two blue slides on the same one. On that second personnel slide, the gold one, the board responsibility, it's the same one that was on the previous page. But the one for the superintendent is a little different. So the board adopt policies and skip over the hiring, recruitment, and employment, or the recruitment evaluation. The board has the responsibility to adopt policies relative to basically employment matters. But then the superintendent's function is very, very different, and it is expressed a little differently than many of the other provisions that you'll find in those Department of Education rules. Direct and supervise the work of all employees of the district, and shall have all the powers necessary to make such directive effective. So we're talking about the direct supervision, investigations, handling of complaints. All of those things are the powers that are necessary to carry out the functions that are expressed in 30202. And that's going to sort of lead us into, well, maybe not the next one, but a little bit later. Okay, so the next section, the governance through policy. As Barrett just pointed out in a couple of those other slides, the board is expressing its idea of the governance of the district through its policy making. Down at the bottom of that slide, so we're at slide 10, I think.
Yep.
Slide 10. It has that big P and the little p. That's one that I coined. I didn't coin the other one. I stole that from a book. The big P, that's the coded policy that you memorialize and you go through 2 readings and you put it into your manual. And then the little p is every time you're making a decision that is not you didn't have a hearing over, an expulsion or a dismissal or something. You're making a decision. You're deciding that you want the BA to bring a report to the next meeting. That's a legislative, that's a policy decision. When you pass your budget, that's a policy. You're expressing your governing objectives through your fiscal policy, which is your budget. When you're making decisions throughout the year regarding approval of transfers, and that's right, you don't use transfers. I've been told that I think 3 times now. But when you're approving your financial reports and so forth, those are expressions of your board policy. So we've got the big P's and the little P's, and it's not always clear exactly, when we're looking at a rule or a statute, what they're talking about, but just have that in mind. So policies, they express the guidelines and philosophical statements which chart the district's course of action. They advise staff and the school community of legal requirements. And when you think of the school community, think of all the different constituencies you have. You have the board itself, you have the administration, you have your personnel, professional staff, support staff, you've got students, you've got members of the community, parents, and so you've got different policies for all those different constituencies, and your policies are the way that you express to those different constituencies, what the legal requirements are, whether they're federal, state, or local district created. And then they create the framework within which the superintendent manages the district and the staff discharge the assigned duties. So that last one, think back to that personnel Department of Education rule that I referenced, where you're creating the policies regarding employment, and then the superintendent is carrying out those policies through the direction of direction and supervision of the employees. And then just especially for the
Thank you.
school board members who may or may not have been immersed in our policy categories, I'll just give you a little brief thing. One of the services that NHSBA provides is a sample policy manual. We have over 450 sample policies. Hopefully you don't have anything near that. But there are over 70 required policies, whether they're required by state law or federal law. They're probably about half and half. No, more state ones. But there are 26 policies required by ED 30604A alone. Those policies are big P policies. You have to have a document in your manual that addresses the particular topic. We don't need to talk about how federal policies work, but priority, when you look at our coding system, there's 2 different codes. There's the policy code itself, so it might be DAF, which is our federal grant management policy. But we also have another one. It's either going to be classified as P, which is priority required by law, recommended, which generally reflects legal obligations, even though you're not required to have a policy. So the P ones, there's a statute or a regulation that says the local board shall adopt a policy on this topic, something to that effect. So that's a required policy, whereas the other one might simply say the local board shall be responsible for this. So you're not required to have a policy, but you are required to do this. And the question is, how would you, especially you new board members, know which federal code of which part of the federal code of regulations you should go to look at in order to figure out that you're supposed to do this thing? So instead, what we do is we try to combine all those significant legal obligations into local policies so that you have a one-place legal reference manual, I guess is what you would call it. And then the last section are the O policies. So you got P, R, and O. O are optional. They oftentimes are, we'll get a couple of requests from districts for policies, and so we'll create one. But you're under no mandate to either follow them or adopt them. And I'm going to go into meetings.
Yeah.
Okay. So this next section, this is from a completely different training topic, but it connects to one of the main things that we think new board members especially need to know, and returning board members or experienced board members need to keep in mind. And it's just really the principles of the state's right to know law, otherwise known as 91A. So if you hear me say 91A or somebody, they're talking about our right to know law. And specifically, how it addresses inter-board communications. There's a whole other part of the right to know law statute that relates to records. We're not going to talk about that in the interest of time. I did forget to mention, I don't want to forget this. In addition to the 2 orientations, we have 3 right to know webinars scheduled. I think the first one's on April 19th, and then it's every 2 weeks after that. They're all different. One's an overview, one's specific to meetings and non-public sessions and non-meetings, and then the third one is more about digital communications and some of the pitfalls in that. And they're all very important for board members to sort of have a feel for. It's not necessary that you take all 3. They're independent, but they're different enough so that you won't be wasting your time if you do all 3. Anyway, so back to what is important for us tonight. 91A2 is the provision of the right to know law regarding meetings specifically. And under that statute, a meeting occurs, whether you want to call it a meeting or not, a meeting occurs when you've got a quorum of the public body convened in any manner in which the participating members are able to communicate contemporaneously. So that would suggest that you don't need to physically convene. You could be in different spots. For the purpose of discussing or acting upon something over which the public body has supervision, control, jurisdiction, or advisory power. Talk about these as being the 3 indicia of a meeting. And if you have these 3 indicia, then you have a meeting under the right to know law. Quorum, in a manner that you're able to communicate contemporaneously, and you're discussing jurisdictional matters. If you have those 3 things, then you have a meeting. And if you have a meeting, turn to the next page. So we're on slide 14. If you have a meeting, then the right to know law requires, number 1, that you provide posted public notice of the meeting. That notice has to be 24 hours in advance. You have to allow the public to attend. You have to conduct the deliberations and decision-making in public unless a non-public session applies. You have to conduct all votes openly, i.e. no secret ballots, or battles, I suppose, because you have to do it all in public. Make appropriate minutes of the meeting, and must allow non-disruptive video, audio recording, even in secret. So if somebody wants to secretly tape you by having their phone in their pocket, they're allowed to do that. One thing that where it says allow the public to attend, that means physically attend the physical location at which the meeting is occurring. So think about those 3 indicia and the ability to communicate contemporaneously. That includes Facebook comments, text messages, telephone calls, serial communications. So I don't call all of you at once, but I call one, then I call the other, and then I call the other. All of those, that one's not a contemporaneous communication, but there's another provision of the statute that specifically addresses serial communications. So if you've got the 3 indicia, you have to have all these things in place. And unfortunately, once in a while, you'll stumble into a situation where you'll realize, oops, I think we're having a meeting. And, you know, once you've done that, you need to get yourself out of it as quickly as possible. And if you really did wade too far, then you probably should do a mea culpa at your next public meeting. That's not a oh, we don't need to worry about it because that's all we need to, you know, all we have to do to fix it is this. It's just, if you've found that you've inadvertently violated it, the best thing you can do is get in front of it and just, you know, tell the public we made a mistake. Number one, it'll help them perhaps forgive you, and number two, it will help train yourselves not to do that again. So we're not going to spend too much, you know, any more time on the three indicia, but just some basics to keep in mind. All meetings are open and public in that they're required to be open to the public. Non-public sessions, note the word change. It's not non-public meeting, it's non-public session. A non-public session always happens after the beginning of a meeting and before the end of a meeting. And then there's several technical requirements that correspond to that and how you go into non-public. Don't have enough time to address those. That is webinar number 2 in late April. Non-public sessions are part of a meeting, a public meeting. The reasons you can go into non-public, and it's an exclusive list, are found in 91A3, paragraph 2. Oh, I've got that down there in the bottom. You'll also hear, for new board meetings, you'll hear this phrase, non-meeting. It's different than a non-public session. There are very limited reasons to have this thing called a non-meeting. The two most common are consultation with counsel and collective bargaining. So both of those, you might have a quorum of your board in a discussion. It doesn't count as a meeting. You don't have to have public notice. You don't have to take minutes, but it's only those two things. Everything else has to either be in public or in a properly motioned non-public session. Yes?
What about like board retreats?
A board retreat is a meeting.
It's a meeting, so anybody can come to it?
Just like this.
Okay.
So sometimes folks will have us come out and do a training at a board retreat, and we, you know, I had one a few years ago where it was on the back porch of somebody's house, and I said, well, do you have enough snacks just in case the public comes? And said, oh yeah, no, we're prepared for that. Somebody did come a couple of years ago. So board, whether you call it a work session or a retreat or planning, they're all board meetings.
And then my only other question is, they don't have to tell us they're recording us, they can secretly do it.
That's correct. That is an exception to the dual consent law in New Hampshire. It only applies in public meetings, or meetings of public bodies. Let's see. Okay, so moving on. Do you want me to do?
Sure.
Okay. So this is where as new members, the pieces that we've already put in place kind of link together, and you know, as you might be, wait, that makes no sense. How can I, you know, what did I get elected for? Board is a quasi-judicial body. In and of itself, it's not the link. What is the link is the telephone call that you get, you know, maybe you've already gotten them. I don't know, how long has it been since you've been sworn in? A week, okay. So you might have already gotten, you know, 1 phone call and 13 emails that are, you know, complaining about the teacher or complaining about the student. Well, what can you as an individual board member do with that? Remember that the very first substantive slide, collective, not individual. You have no authority to do anything to resolve that problem. What you can do is communicate, give them the roadmap for how they address that problem, and then circle back, make sure that it, you know, somebody actually picked up on it. So you get the telephone call, what do you do with it? You know, I'm complaining about Mrs. Smith in the 3rd grade class. Depending on how you've structured it within your SAU, might direct that to the superintendent, you might direct that to the building principal. I'm sure, you know, they'll make that clear to you, but it's one or the other. Because they're the ones who are responsible for making sure that somebody's taking care of that issue.
And just to add to that, the protocol Will was talking about with, you know, contact the superintendent or the principal or whatever, that's gonna be the local policy, because again, it all comes back to policies. That's how you're able to govern the district. And why else do you wanna have that policy? It doesn't sound, to your constituent, it doesn't sound like you're just brushing them off or putting them off. You say, the board has a policy on this, and you can provide it to them, you know, so it doesn't look like you're just being standoffish, or you don't wanna answer their questions, saying, this is how the board has chosen to operate.
Yes, and so the way that conversation goes is, you need to get enough information so that you can refer it to the right person. You don't need any more information beyond that, and that's going to lead into this quasi-judicial thing. But the other piece, so number one, you're getting enough information so that you can refer it and just double, you know, check in with the principal or the I received a call from so-and-so, did you hear from them? I told them to call you. If it's a real serious matter, then you might ask that, you know, check in with the principal or the superintendent and say, can you report back, you know, to me or to the board, as the case may be. So that's one part of it, that's one part of the communication. But the other part is, as Barrett suggested, is giving them the information they need to properly channel that. What is your policy for complaints about individual? It's why am I drawing
KEB.
KEB, there we go. So KEB, it's just policy, the alphabet soup in my head. So KEB is our sample. You probably have the same code, or you have one similar to that. Know that, you know, have that ready in your head. Look at the policy, read the policy, be familiar with it, so that when you get that call, you're not just pushing them off, you're giving them a pathway to try to solve that problem. And I can tell you, as somebody who represented districts for a long time, if it gets to you know, if a dispute gets to the attorney's desk, one of the first things we look for is there a procedural defect where we can get rid of it and just send it back. So now you're just sending them back to start all over again. Or even worse, you didn't exhaust your administrative remedies, you're out of luck. So you're not really helping them, and the best way to do that is try to solve it at the lowest you know, possible place, and knowing your policy for that is helpful. Okay, so now we get into board as a quasi-judicial body, and why some of this is important. So first of all, you don't have the power to solve the problem. You don't have the power to tell an employee, whether it's the superintendent or the classroom teacher or the custodian, you as an individual do not have the power to tell them to do something. Okay, so that's number one. And number two, the other reason why it's important that you stay sort of out of that remember I said don't ask more questions than you need in order to refer it. It's because as soon as you start asking questions, you are investigating. And that is not your function. That is the function of the administration. And at times, if it's a serious enough case, it's the function of an outside, you know, an independent investigator. In almost all of board work, you're acting in a legislative capacity. You're creating policy, whether it's big P or little p policy, you're making governance decisions. However, at times, you're going to be called to act in what's called a quasi-judicial capacity. You are the judge and you are the jury over individual interest matters. So the ones that are most common, and this is where we need the glasses, for students, expulsion, long-term suspension, probably much fewer long-term suspension after they changed the statute a few years ago. Manifest hardship cases. You may also have some policies that create, you know, various appeal matters relative to students. Some districts have, you know, early kindergarten enrollment or something like that. And then for employees, the common ones are dismissal, non-renewal, labor grievances. In each of those types of cases, you're not acting in a legislative capacity, you're acting as a judge and a jury. And when you hear those terms, you associate that with due process and what our notions of due process are. And, you know, what are the basic principles that we look at for due process in, you know, our understanding in this country? Fair and impartial judge and an ability to hear and challenge the evidence and testimony that's being used against you or being used in relation to your case. When you are a board member, you know, first of all, you're not subject to the jury rules. You don't have to be, you know, ignorant of the sort of backgrounds and all those things, because you're going to hear things. Especially those of you in the very small districts, not only are you going to hear that the thing happened, you're going to know who the people were, and you might know how, you know, what their reputation is in the community. That's okay. That's something that just can't be avoided. But what you can't do, so you get the phone call, it's Mrs. Smith, 3rd grade, this building. You don't then say, well, who else saw it? How, you know, have they had problems in the past? You know, those are things that you don't need to know at this point, because as you're asking those questions, you're forming your own opinion. You're also forming an opinion based on the person who's calling you, and you're hearing information that's unchallenged by someone else. And that's, you know, now you're building a level of partiality instead of impartiality. So, you know, the sort of bridge between the 3 sections that we just covered were, you know, number one, you're limited with your, as an individual. You've got a policy function. You've got a quasi-judicial function. But then you also have these requirements for meetings and things that you do as a body all have to be done in public. So I don't know how they connected all together, but hopefully I think we covered the topics, and yes, we did it, 30 minutes.
Are there any questions about anything that we covered tonight or anything that we didn't cover tonight that the newbies might have questions about, or even the returning members? Something's been stewing in your brain since we were here a year ago and you finally have an opportunity to ask. Right to know law, policy, anything at all.
Thank you both for keeping that. I know it was a lot to cover quickly.
Yeah.
So basically, obviously, the emergence of issues in our communities are on the rise, and people are getting more vocal. And I think as board members, we all continually deal with people coming to us, whether it's just a friend over a drink, you know, airing their feelings, or on social media or email or whatever. It sounds like the absolute default course of action is, I recognize your concern, I'd like to direct you to the administration, and I'm happy to follow up with you, right? So just always sort of recuse ourselves from an opinion, if you will.
So it depends on if it, anything relating to staff or another student.
Yeah.
You'd have to refer back to the proper channels. A common one is special education.
Yeah.
You get a phone call from a parent who advocating for their child, you know, as they should, that feels they're not getting the services, they're not following the IEP. Again, as a school board member, you know, as we talked about, you don't have any authority to call the special ed director and say, do this for Mrs. Jones or do that for Mrs. Jones. There's a process, right? You refer them back to the process. Conversely, if it's something that is within the board's purview, budget, facilities, you know, if they call you and say there are, you know, there are 5 potholes, you know, the size of a VW bug in the high school parking lot, you know, call Meredith and say, we really got to get these patched up. You know, so if it's something within the board's purview, budget, collective bargaining, strategic planning, you know, yeah, you can have a conversation with your constituents, but staff and students are just 2 issues that things can go sideways real quick. And so, you know, refer those back through the proper channels. I mean, your comment about social media, I mean, just stay off it. I stay off it. There's nothing good comes from engaging with people on so, I mean, let me ask you this, have you ever gotten into an argument or a disagreement on Facebook or any sort of social platform, and have you changed anybody's mind?
No.
No, but unfortunately, sometimes people don't know things that are going
Right,
on.
right,
Unless it's
misinformation.
Facebook, and sometimes there's things that people
I
need to know, and they
I
should
know,
know them,
I
and they
know.
shouldn't hear on Facebook.
Good.
And we've had that
so
issue.
let me,
Yeah.
it's a couple of warnings about Facebook. You know, it's one thing to see what's going on, but you create possible right-to-know law violations. You can potentially create individual liability for yourself when you start to engage or communicate school board business online. And the two biggest issues, and these are, one of them is emerging, there's been a couple of cases nationwide in the past year, but, so the first one was, remember I talked about the 3 indicia of a meeting, and I specifically mentioned Facebook comments. So somebody says something just blatantly wrong about something that happened at your board meeting the other night. You know, the board completely rejected blank and, you know, put pedophiles in the schools and whatever. And you know, and you're like, we didn't even talk about that last night. What do you mean? So you go on there and you put a comment, and then there's 13 comments, and another board member sees it, so the other board member puts a comment too. If you're, I think you have 1-3 board. So you've just created a meeting because you just had a quorum of your board communicate in a way that you can contain, right, about a matter, yes. So that's one problem with communicating on Facebook. And then the second one, and this is the one that is newer. It happened in a couple of states a few years ago, but I just saw 2 decisions in the last year in other places, and that is, you know, a lot of board members, when you ask them why they got elected, it's because I think we need better communication within the public. We need to communicate with the public better. I didn't like the way, you know, communications came to me as a parent, et cetera. So they decide they're going to have, you know, here's my community school board Facebook page. As soon as you put information about school board on there, have you created an official site? And if you have, and then somebody starts commenting about, you know, you're the pedophile because you know, you did this thing and put this disgusting book in your library, and you say, well, no. So I'm getting rid of that comment. You just violated somebody's First Amendment rights. So that there just lots of different reasons.
There are ways to manage.
Yeah.
I mean, there are ways to manage that. I don't want the board or anybody that may be watching at home to think that we're telling boards not to engage with their constituents. It can be done. If you want to have, you know, Jane Doe for Southampton School Board Facebook page, have at it. And if you get elected and you want to have it as a way to engage with your constituents, you can. But we talk about this a lot in one of the right to know law trainings about digital and electronic communication. You have to put a disclaimer on your page saying this is not an official page of the Southampton School Board. All comments are mine and mine alone. They do not reflect the thoughts or votes or anything of the school board, the SAU 21 board, the Southampton board, the Hampton Falls board, whatever it might be.
So you can receive communications, but you don't post public responses. Anyway, that's a whole other training in and of itself. Yes.
I was going to say, do you have a training on how to handle public comments?
Yes.
Perfect.
I don't have one of those scheduled. There is a recorded webinar that about a year. No, less than that.
Last
because
year.
it was in response to 18974.
Oh, okay.
So last year, the statute passed that requires public comments, so I did two. I think I did one in October and one in August. And then,
because I think the one thing that I struggle with the most is like not being able to respond to them.
I just had a long conversation with them.
And so it gives off the impression that we're either like apathetic and don't care, or
So this has been a topic at the legislature as well too. Here's what I can tell you. You on one hand, yes, you want to be responsive to your constituents, absolutely. If there's 50 people in the audience and they all want to talk though,
Yeah.
and you're going to engage in a back and forth and a Q&A and be responsive, your public comment session is going to last for 4 hours
Yeah.
then, right? And you did a back and forth and responsiveness for 2 questions to this person, but only 1 question from this person. This person got 7 minutes of your time. This person got 3 minutes of your time. It can be, if it's done informally, if there's 2 people in the audience, and it's the same guy that's been going to every school board meeting since the late 70s, and he knows everything that goes on in the school district. If he has a question and you can answer it right there, do it. But when they're getting, if it's a dialogue and enticing you into a debate,
Yeah.
you can't, that's why it's hard to craft a policy given all these nuances. But yeah, there were a couple bills at the legislature, one last year and one this year, that basically require a Q&A session. And it's just,
Okay.
so how long does the Q&A have to go on for? Does everybody get a limited number of questions? Everybody gets 2 questions and then we move on?
Right.
It just, it's fraught with challenges, but I have the ease of saying that because I don't have to, I don't have to get elected or get my budget passed.
Right.
So I understand that. You gotta have some nuance, local custom and local tradition. I mean, I've been to board meetings in small communities where it's the one person in the audience. And, I mean, he might as well be sitting up at the table because he's engaged in the conversation and discussion with the board. So there's nuance, custom, tradition. It's hard to give a definitive answer. It's hard to craft a policy.
Do you have any recommendations on communicating that to the public to say, we can't respond
Go
to
ahead.
you so that they understand that it's
Yeah.
not that we don't care?
Right.
So, yes, and I think it's actually in our sample policy, there's
Okay.
a provision.
So
but-
reads my policies?
But there's, well, no, there's
it.
450 of them. I can't even remember the codes.
Right.
No, but one thing that especially for larger boards, so for the little small K through 4 school where there's 30 parents in the whole population, that's different than, Manchester or something like that. So it's hard to craft a one-size-fits-all, but one thing that I think does work for a lot of different reasons, and it especially works after you've done it a while, is you have your public comment session, and it's got a box, just like this, and everybody gets their 3 minutes, and interrupting, the question and answer, how do you time that? Are you, so if you give a 1.5 minute response, is that part of their 3 minutes? Because if it is, and you're only gonna go 3 minutes, did you just cut out a bunch of other people? So you have your box, and everybody gets treated the same way, but immediately following your public comment session, you have a board response session. And in that, you make yourself, you don't necessarily have to go through each comment, but if somebody had a question that was interesting, do you put it on an agenda for a next meeting? Is it something, I'm interested in knowing that too. Superintendent, can you bring can you look into this and bring, make a report at the next meeting? So you're responding to them, but there's a couple of boards I could say, hey, go watch the film of the meeting on March 13th, 2017, and you'll say, no, never, ever. Because the person just baited, and then it just turned into a shouting match.
Yeah.
And we like to think that everybody approaches these with an even keel and with good intentions, but it could be the board member that loses his cool or her cool. It can be the member of the public. It could be somebody who isn't even involved in the direct exchange, but they're the ones who are being indirectly attacked. But having a meaningful way of listening and then responding, maybe independently. And the only questions that you probably should be answered are those that, why are you doing this? Oh, we adopted this policy last year. Or why aren't you doing this? Because the voters voted down the special warrant article last year. So there's a specific historical fact, the board has already addressed it, or the legislative body has already addressed it. And then there was one other piece to it, oh well. But I think I discussed that briefly in that recorded webinar, but
Okay.
Election time is the best.
Election.
Yeah, that's the best public comment.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this material or any other topic relative to school boards? Q&A?
oh.
What's that?
So this, I have a couple of things I just wanted to point out. The meeting flow chart, that's the thing that talks about the 3 indicia. I'm not going to talk about it now, but I did want to just share a couple of things that are in, especially the right to know law handout, new board members. This is how non-public sessions work. There are all the reasons, the mechanics of going in and coming out and sealing minutes. And then this document here, they're all in the packet that's called Right to Know Resources. And this one here is just this is a two-page basics of the right to know law. Familiarize yourself with that. And then I think lastly, you've got just excerpts of the right
These
to
are
know
on
law.
our agenda, not
Yeah,
printed.
just
Yes.
want to let the board know they're all included in the public content of your agenda. The only
Yes.
thing we printed out were the handout and the flow chart, so everything else you can find in your agenda. And if anybody ever has difficulty finding the attachments in the agenda, please let us know, because we do try to put everything in for everybody. So if you can't find it, just, let us know and we'll show you where it's at, so.
One last request on our end. I'm glad you spoke up, Rhonda, because it made me remember. If you could get the new school board member contact info to us, either email Amanda or give Amanda a call, just so we'll get you on our mailing list. We send out, we try and limit it to 2 per week. We do like a general Monday email that has all our webinars, news articles of interest, so on and so forth. And then Fridays, we try on Fridays. Sometimes it's a lot of work to get a legislative update out as well too. But so you'll get emails from us about our webinars and things of that nature. So we'll make sure that we get everybody on our
Have
mailing
everybody
list.
in, if you're not getting them, please let me know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sometimes that happens. There's an appointment mid-year and somebody falls through the cracks or whatever. We didn't get it entered into our system. So make sure you're getting emails from us. If you're not, please contact Rhonda, and she has Will and I on speed dial sometimes. So. Anything else we can do for you? Thank you so much for the invitation. It's always great to come on out. We appreciate the opportunity to speak directly with our members. We hope it was helpful. Check out our website, check out the emails. We've got a handful of webinars coming up this spring. And as always, reach out to NHSBA if we can be of any assistance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
They have a Coke machine open.
Can I ask, this is probably a good time to remind us all of our policy on public notice of meetings, because that's why Rhonda goes crazy trying to get us all to commit to meetings, because if there is going to be a forum for this, legislative sessions, things like that, it does become a public meeting. So what, can you remind us what that is? Do you know it?
Is there a vending
Meetings all
machine
have
out
to
there?
be legally posted at least 24 hours in advance. But if we find out that there's not going to be a quorum, I can't just instantly say, oh, we can do this tomorrow. Because we do have to post, 24 hours in advance. And if we find out late on Friday, in time to get it posted, you're looking at a Tuesday meeting, not a Monday meeting.
And there's a lot of calendars to juggle.
A lot of calendars to juggle, so, yeah.
And quickly to identify your question when you said about the policy. So we have a policy in place on our board, our CBER board policy that specifically states that we will not respond back to public comment. And then we had a situation where we had to address it in a meeting, and we then made a request, like a board member made a request to add an agenda item of response time, and then we did that, and that's like kind of how we proceeded. But we have a policy that literally says the public will comment.
Everybody does have
That's
that.
the
Yeah, we have
The
the
same
same
one,
policy.
okay.
I think it's just getting the public to know that.
Right.
Because
Yes.
sometimes they stand up there and they're like, so are you gonna respond?
Yeah.
And we're like, thanks. Thank you for your comment.
Thanks so much.
Some boards do read that at the outset of their meetings.
So that's my question is, do any other boards read something like that or have something posted so that it
Hampton Falls
isn't
has.
this, like,
Winnicott has.
We've done it in the past, anytime I open public comment, this is for public comment, we'll not be engaging in a discussion at this point.
everybody
You
has
know.
3 minutes?
Right, and you get, exactly.
Okay.
So, I think, basically, it's educating the public for that.
Yeah.
But it's also educating the public on what we can do and what we can't do.
Yeah,
And
that's
biggest
the
thing,
hardest part, yeah.
So,
And you can respond back in the moment, correct? At least the chair could say, just a reminder. Or Meredith, I mean, you said it before in ours, just a reminder that we don't, we're not gonna respond back. But
Right.
Yeah.
if they have questions, they can follow up
Yes.
any other way.
Yeah.
Via email or to the right channels and people that it actually falls to.
Yeah.
Okay, next item on the agenda is Portrait of a Learner.
Yeah.
Welcome, and the beautiful people in the back. Oh, yes, well, I didn't want to interrupt you, I apologize, so we technically closed public comment at 6:36, it's 6:59, and. I saw no one enter the room at 6:36. Okay.
I thought it was like a separate, I thought, is this like another level that we've got this next?
All right, thank you, Dave. And Keith.
I've seen it before.
All right, let's talk about kids for a little bit. All right. Thanks for being here. Sorry, it's kind of a precarious turnaround for you guys. First of all, just thanks to the team for being here. These guys are coming off 2 days of presentations in Rhode Island, and I asked them to show up tonight just to kind of share the voice for Portrait, and they said yes. So thanks, guys, for doing this. I'll just kind of start at ground zero just to put everybody on the same page for Portrait of a Learner, including the new board members. We started this process actually in the budgeting last year. We said we wanted to do a strategic plan for the SAU, something that was going to incorporate all of our voices and all of our vision moving forward. And we've put our shoulder to the wheel, and we've gotten a lot done this year. In fact, we're right on schedule, right on the plan. But I want to make sure you're all aware of kind of the big pieces that we put together throughout the course of this school year. So the impetus for the Portrait of a Learner, I'm not going to read all these bullets, was really kind of looking at our SAU post-COVID. We came back from COVID. We had CARES ESSER funds go to different things than they had, than we had had before, but different supports than we had had before. Social workers, counselors, more kind of wraparound supports. We had the Bridge program here at Winnicott. A lot more kind of all-inclusive programs for our students. And we felt obliged to not only reflect that back to the community, but also kind of celebrate and coalesce the vision of where we currently were post-COVID. So this happened both on an SAU level, but it also happened on a statewide level. I know a lot of you guys are familiar with NHLI and the work they've done statewide, but they were in a parallel process basically of saying, what is a Portrait of a Learner for a New Hampshire student, not just SAU 21. So that was the impetus of this, where we began this whole thing.
New Hampshire Learning Initiative.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, acronym soup, right? New Hampshire Learning Initiative. And videos? We have one student video. Yeah, it's important to get student voice here. So this is at the outset of this whole thing. We had a number of students that you'll hear about kind of our process. But we started this thing just asking kids how they felt supported at Winnicott High School, how they felt supported in our sending schools, and what we could do better. So this is Haley Sanborn reacting to that question. We'll just do one.
I don't feel that prepared. I feel like I'm prepared for college, but past college, I feel like I'm kind of clueless on just the basic ideas of how to be an adult, like how to pay taxes, or I don't even know that much about interest, or how to get loans, or anything that you really need as a skill to be an adult in the real world, I feel like hasn't really been touched upon in school. We've learned a lot about enough to get into college so we can get a career, but I don't know anything about getting a career or having an adult life. So I feel like I'm underprepared.
So we have the next one, which we won't play. But so these are some of the vulnerable conversations that we had at the outset of this thing, right? What are we doing well? Obviously, there were a lot of positive comments and feedback from our kids, but also it was clear some of the gaps and some of the ways that we could move forward in terms of the SAU, how we're preparing our kids. Please, yeah.
Like the theme that came up, not feeling prepared for adult life.
We had 5 themes that came out, and the verbiage was essential life skills was one of the themes that we pulled out.
But that came primarily from students or also from?
Also from community and also from staff. We'll get there, promise.
Do you have a video of the more positive?
Do you want me to play it? This is not I'll choose the really positive ones. No. Look. We did not shy away from vulnerability.
I will say, for what that's worth, that's a outstanding student who has written and published her own book. She's involved in a number of extracurriculars. So she is well prepared for life, but she feels like some of those fundamental skills.
She just doesn't realize how fun it is to pay taxes.
She's just worried about that.
Right. Yeah. So there was that vulnerable conversation with kids, and there was also a vulnerable conversation, frankly, with staff. It's hard to have that conversation with a personal finance teacher, for example. And one of the and another piece of discomfort was this was layered on top of you guys know the 400 other initiatives that we have going on in all of our SAU. And the instant response from a teacher would be, we're doing one more thing, right? This is another thing on my plate. So we thought very early and made a purposeful decision very early to make the word coherence kind of at the forefront of this. The idea was the Portrait of a Learner was going to make these initiatives that we already had going on more coherent. It would give a why to some of the stuff that we were already doing. We were already doing social emotional learning, tiered support structures, equity, transition planning from 8th to 9th grade. We were already doing competency-based. We were making community connections through ELOs, school-wide expectations, career pathways. All that stuff was going on, and this was a way to braid that together, to make it coherent, hopefully in the eyes of students, in the eyes of community, and also in the eyes of staff. Okay? So, that said, I'll pass it to Donna. She can talk about how we attack this.
Hi everybody, I'm Donna Couture. I'm the Director of Extended Learning at Winnicott High School. I wanted a quick mention about the videos. So in October, we did go through, and we filmed students, we filmed community partners, and we filmed staff members asking them a lot of different questions about this process. So that was our pre-work, really trying to dig into where their feelings were. So there are some really positive elements in those videos, and if you're interested and want to scroll through our social media, in October we posted a lot of those videos, so feel free to go back and look in that archive and see those for yourself. But part of our pre-work, along with polling all of our stakeholders, was to just develop a full implementation plan. We really spent last year planning for the next couple of years and how we were going to spend our time, and we wanted to be really thoughtful about making sure that we were looking at every aspect of this. And so the plan, which, do they have access to this presentation?
Yeah, we'll post it. We'll post this on Board Doc. Not right now. I don't think it's in Board Docs right now.
No, it's not.
We'll get you a link.
So at some point, the things that are underlined in this PowerPoint will be linkable, and you can see the full plan if you're interested. But essentially, it comes down to 2 phases. The first phase was actually defining what the Portrait of a Learner is, and you're going to learn a little bit more about that because we're now on the tail end of that process. Phase 2, which you're going to hear a little snippet about in a little bit, is really where we think the meat of the work is. So once we've established and solidified what our Portrait of a Learner is, then we have to actualize it. We have to take it off the wall, so to speak, and put it into action and figure out how are we going to make sure that we are continuing to celebrate and do the things that we're doing well, but also fill in the gaps where we need to provide more services and things for our students. So this, again, is just an outline of that detailed work. I won't go into any more detail than that. You can go ahead and read that at your leisure. But I'm going to hand it over to Lauren Marsden now, who's going to talk about that beginning stage with our stakeholders.
Hi, everybody. I'm the curriculum coordinator here at Winnicott. So we started this data collection back last August. It started with the administrative team doing it at their retreat. We did this visioning protocol. And the protocol that we did is the same one that all the stakeholders did. So all the different meetings I'm about to describe did the exact same process. So, like I said, in August, the admin across the district did it at their retreat. And then a couple days before all of the staff returned to the start of the school year, we had some teachers and some students come in and also go through the process as a train-the-trainer model. So the idea was they were able to give their input to the main questions, which you'll see in a moment, and also learn how to facilitate this process. Because then about 2 days later, when the entire SAU returned for the year, so about 400 people, we went through this process, having them lead the process. So then we also had community nights, many of you came, in all the different districts to go through the same process as well, to understand what was important for everybody to see with our students. And this is the process that everybody went through. I should also mention, we also had middle and high school students do this as well. So parents, students, community members, business partners, staff, administration, we heard from all angles to gather this information. And this was the exact same handout that was given to all stakeholders. It was adapted a little bit for the middle school just because of language and age. But other than that, it was the exact same. So we had 3 main parts that we talked about. So that would be, the first part was talking about student vision. And in 2027, what does it mean for our students to be college, career, and life ready? Part 2 talked about facilities, programs, and resources. And what does it mean for our facilities and programs to be future ready for whatever access we need for students to have? And then areas of growth. And as Dave alluded to, these were some of those really raw, hard conversations that were great to have. And I can say when we did this with the staff, it was across the SAU. So you would have a 2nd grade art teacher with a high school history teacher, or a middle school guidance counselor mixed in there as well. And we went old school, no tech, we just had conversations, we had chart paper and markers and took the information down. And then we were able to, as you'll see in the next part, really synthesize it all together. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to pass it off to Laura DeBell.
Thanks, Lauren. Climbing in here. I'm Lauren DeConstant, the curriculum coordinator in Seabrook. So nice to see everyone. So the next step, once we filled all those chart papers and we gathered all the information from literally hundreds of people, students, community members, we ended up with a lot of raw data. So we had to make a decision about what we were going to do that in order to synthesize that into something that made sense, into kind of more solidified themes. So we took that raw data, made it into a binder, and separated it by questions, and then created a smaller stakeholder group that gathered together and synthesized that data by looking at themes, looking at words that were repeated, looking at just kind of what those themes were that emerged from the group. And that work led to the pillars that came out from that discussion. We ended up with 4 pillars from that day: academics, mindsets, the essential life skills, and the physical and mental health. And what was really nice about those conversations and digging through the data rather than coming to it with preconceived notions, we really let the data do the work for the group. By having it be old school, where it was conversation, discussion based, versus getting up on a Google form and anonymously putting in some thoughts. We really had those discussions which created, we came up with surprises. The idea that those life skills were really rising to the top in all questions with all groups. You know, how are we helping our students be life ready? And then combined in with that was that physical and mental health post-COVID. I mean, that was loud and clear, that parents, that students, that teachers were really concerned about how we were taking care of our students, not just academically, but their mental health and their physical well-being. So it became a pillar. So again, by going into it with that open discussion format and an open look, we were able to really see what mattered to the community and to the students. Then, from there, we circled back again with those 4 themes and asked, what are we missing? We came back together with a smaller group. We brought in student voice. We looked at it again, put it back out. What are we missing? And as it turned out, in some of those discussions, we realized that we hadn't included a community engagement. We had it was embedded. We thought it was kind of embedded in the other themes. But then we realized, no, it really should be pulled out into its own theme. And this was really student-driven. I was sitting at one of the tables with a student, high school student, who was talking about that global impact of green energy and looking to the future and diversity. And that was something that was coming out in other discussions too. So we really leaned on the people that were in the conversations to help shape the themes. And so it ended up being a theme called community engagement, which includes all of that and some others. So once do you want to talk about the student engagement?
Sure, yeah.
I think, yeah. So part of that student voice, I'm going to have Becca explain a little bit about how she included some student voice through Northampton.
So I believe it was actually the last Northampton Select Board meeting. We had 2 students, 2 of our 8th graders, present to the Select Board the work of the portrait. So, Meredith was there with us. And so they shared the 5 pillars and got feedback from the board. But a nice thing also was at the end, they asked the Select Board how they can support the work moving forward, how they can help make this vision of what our graduates look like become a reality for them. So already beginning that community engagement piece and working together collaboratively.
Me?
Yep, Dave.
Okay, so just so you guys can see the shape of these themes. So we did this old school, as we've said before, but we also kind of checked ourselves new school. We had a member of our team actually put this into SPSS, it's qualitative research, basically, developing, counting the number of phrases that are associated with a given theme. So these are, this is what came out in terms of the shape of these themes, okay? This isn't any final refined language, but these are the words that kind of fell under each of our definitions of our 5 pillars there. So you can start seeing kind of how we started to break them up. Obviously, there's some that live, the notion of inclusion, for example, it lives somewhere between a mindset and academics, right? And you just have to kind of put it where it seems to fit most. So we had a lot of those kind of debates, but this is the shape, if you will, of our different themes. What this is also going to do for us moving forward is this is going to give us the language to start creating working documents for our staff. So when the staff comes in, they can start saying, hey, look, what are these? How do we fulfill these needs, these specific concrete needs, as opposed to just these big, large themes? Make sense? Okay. Becca, and Becca's gonna, I think that's it, right?
Hi, Becca Carlson, Northampton Curriculum Coordinator. Forgot to introduce myself earlier. So we are currently engaged in finalizing a graphic for the Portrait of a Learner. This has been something that's been really important to the members of this team because it's really going to serve as that that reminder about the coherence of the efforts that we're working on right now, as well as the shared vision of all of the SAU 21 schools. So you can see we started off with the representations for each one of our sending schools, and from that the designer created a color palette so that our final product will be able to be integrated into all of the branding, so to speak, for all of our schools currently. And these were it's a selection of the first round of ideas that she gave to us. So you can see that there is the one that would represent the portrait of a learner, as well as the individual icons that represent the 5 pillars that we just talked about. And this is where we're settling right now. This is not a final, we want to incorporate SAU 21 into that. We'd like to, a few things that we're tweaking still, but this is generally what it's going to look like. And actually having the words written into the circles was results of student input from Meredith's Student Advisory Group. They had that idea. But we love the idea that it looks a bit like a labyrinth, so it's a reminder of kind of that personalized pathway for our students. We are excited to have this being used in our K-8 schools and our high school because, as we know, parents, they interact with schools very differently as their students go through the system. And it'll be really nice for the parents to see this vision and this theme being carried through on the student's trajectory through our school system. And then as we are working on different curriculum documents or policy discussions or whatever the case may be, being able to really label it with these pillars and where it fits within our vision, I think will also be really powerful. So we're very excited for this aspect of the work as well.
The other thing, I won't use the exploded diagram metaphor, but the other thing this allows us to do, guys, is it allows us to reverse engineer some of these big themes, right? So we can start taking a look at physical and mental wellness as an entity, right? And really kind of dig into that. Community engagement as an entity. So we can start getting a little bit more concrete as we move forward into the fall's work. Speaking of fall work, spring 2023, fall 2023. We're gonna be coming to board meetings in the spring of 2023 with a few ideas for just getting some baseline data about how we're doing with respect to this. Okay, we have an academic Gallup poll that we'd like to get permission to get out to our sending schools and our high school that you'll probably be seeing in May-ish, hopefully. And then we have the PAIR survey, we already have that data. Youth risk behavior survey, that's for that social emotional piece, right? And then I'm into the stuff that we normally do, right? Course selection and success rates, program review process, access to trades like SST, access to ELO opportunities, particularly at the middle school level, and career pathway development. Like, for example, you can see a program of studies at the high school that actually has labels with different career pathways, like color codes, or just, hey, this class is associated with these professions, just getting kids thinking about their career pathways as they go through Winnicott. So you can just start visualizing where this is gonna take us, right? Fall of 2023, when we come back from this summer with our teachers, like I said, we're gonna be creating working documents allowing teachers to reflect on how this stuff shows up in their practice and in their schools. I think one of the side conversations we need to have, and we've had at a couple faculty meetings, is what does this look like for us as adults too? It's an ecosystem of learners, right? And if we're not modeling and we're not, aspiring to these things, then something's wrong as well. So I think there's going to be a portrait of kind of an adult conversation too, right? So working documents with our teachers and in our schools, making sure we validate the programs and services that we are offering, and defining any college and career pathways. And I think one thing that we're hearing also loud and clear is back to the notion of getting outside the walls of the school over and over again. That's what we're hearing. We're hearing internships, we're hearing ELOs, we're hearing getting out and working with the community. And we're also hearing a shared responsibility. Becca said that loudly, and I think it deserves reiterating. If this is going to be owned and generated by the community, there's a responsibility of the community too to help ensure that this comes alive. This isn't just us carrying this big bag. It's going to be up to the boards in the community to own it as well. So that's the work we're looking forward to this spring and into the fall. It's just been a great process. It's been enlightening, and the best part has been working with our kids to shape it. So I'll pause for comments, questions, whatever.
So, sorry, my voice is failing a little bit, but I would just add that in May, our hope is to bring kind of the final version of this part of the document back to the joint board for adoption, right? So that we sort of agree on what the pillars are and we finalize that piece, and then we'll come back to you into next year with sort of here's the strategic plan portion, right? The actions, the roadmap, the measurable goals and objectives tied to those pillars and the work that we hope to accomplish.
I just want to say real quick, you guys are doing an amazing job, and I know that it's a ton of work because even sitting in on just like 2 of those meetings there was so much information. So, but you can see it, how it's developed from the start to now. Like, it's amazing, and what an awesome thing that you guys are doing for the kids and the community. I think it's really great.
Yeah, slow and steady. Bill McGowan says it's going to be a portrait of a grandfather, I think.
What an awesome grandfather.
We're doing it the right way, and that's purposeful, for sure.
And I'm sure there's implementation of everything that you guys are talking about on a daily basis now, because everybody's more aware of what is, what's going on, right?
So,
awareness is huge too.
Yeah.
right, and it validates some of the things that, when somebody asks me about about course selection, for example, you go into the AP selection and all that kind of stuff. But it validates the fact that we're doing family and consumer sciences here. It validates the fact that we got a great relationship with SST and trades. It validates some of the things that I wouldn't necessarily focus on in an answer, but I know that I know it's valued by everybody.
And I think for a lot of the staff too, it's taking all the puzzle pieces that we had of everything that we're doing, and it just puts it all together, and it just makes it feel like there's a one spot for a why, and it's not all discombobulated. So it's been nice to see them to streamline, and I think it takes a little bit of a sense relief for them too. Okay, right, this is why we're doing it, and they can connect it right to something that we have.
And we welcome any feedback.
That stood out to me is how you're looking to associate the classwork with the career. I think everyone in this room has said, why am I taking this out of the class?
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? So I think that's incredibly important just to know, okay, because I tell my kids, it's not like necessarily what you're learning, it's how to learn in a different way, and I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah. But also life skills. Like, I worked at BU for 14 years and hired many work study students, and can tell you life skills ran the gamut depending on, their history and where they came from. So that is huge, and will take them far.
Donna said it, but I want to reiterate it. We welcome feedback throughout this whole thing. This is going to be a moving target. Hopefully, it's going to be an evolving thing for a long time. There's a fancy QR code. You don't need that. We'll get you a link for feedback. If you want to yell at us or type in congratulations or whatever, we'll link it up. We'll link it up.
Other things
Right,
give us
yeah.
some obscure email.
Complaints go to them. Right. Any other questions before we exit? And you guys can.
No, thank you
Yes.
guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Kelly, you better go before they start something else. Can we get it the new way?
Next on the agenda is the operation committee meeting from January 9th, and we just need to make a motion to approve minutes. And there's only 3 people that can make the motion and approve, which is Jill, Jim, and Tamara.
Jim was not at the meeting.
This was the 9th,
From January. And remember, we tried.
This was the January 9th meeting.
Oh.
Nothing.
It couldn't be approved, right, because we didn't have, yeah. Okay. We are. I'll make a motion to approve the meetings of January 9th, 2023 Operations Committee.
I will second.
All 3 in favor?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then just, need to get approval of minutes from the January 24th joint board meeting. Can I get a motion?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
I need to abstain. I don't think I was
I need
there.
to abstain. I don't think I was there.
Do you want to get abstained
Yeah, I need to,
first?
yeah.
Rhonda,
Do
or are
those
you
in
good?
favor and then you
You
can
weren't
do
there.
abstention.
It
I
might
wasn't?
be easier if I just
I
read
looked
your
at the
names
minutes.
real
Oh,
quick.
sure. Yeah,
Miss
perfect.
Penny,
Thank you.
Barbara,
You were there.
I was here, yes, yes.
Anthony,
Abstain.
Jill,
Yes.
Lisa,
Abstain.
Michael,
Abstain.
Danielle,
Yes.
Jennifer,
Abstain.
Kelly,
She abstains too.
She wasn't there.
We're gonna speak for her.
Christina,
Yes.
Becky is not present as well, Lauren,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Nicole,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Tamara,
Yes.
Desiree, abstain, and Wendy.
Abstain.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, action items, policy second read and adoption.
Only one. This is your fixed asset policy. This was a first read in January. It mirrors the policy with the boards. I've not received any comments or questions, but I'm happy to answer any if there are any.
Any questions?
I'll make a motion to approve and adopt policy F-004.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, next item, end of school calendar year 2023.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Surprisingly, people have already reached out to ask when the last day of school might be. I know that's shocking to all of you. You know, February 23rd was pushing the upper limits of our tolerance for snow days. We have had 3 cancellation days, except in Southampton, where there are only 2, and in Hampton Falls, where there are actually 4, because one was a cancellation due to some damage that they sustained as a result of one of the cancellation days. So, so of course, for counselors, not a lot.
Getting a lot of work done in
Yeah.
school that we wouldn't have otherwise, so,
We really,
yeah, we got lucky.
yeah, it worked out.
The originally scheduled last day of school was June 14th. We will meet all of our hours in all of our districts. Well, Southampton, hang on for a second, I'll come back to you. Southampton can be done on June 15th. That's our recommendation. for
Oh,
students.
whatever.
We're gonna take the one day and finish on June 15th. In the other districts, we suggest that the last day of students be the Friday, June 16th. We meet the hours requirements for students by that day, rather than have students return for the Monday to make up, 3.5 hours of additional time.
That'd be a waste of day.
That would still, though,
Sorry.
we still have then, except in Southampton, where staff would finish a day earlier. In our other districts, there would still be 2 work days remaining for staff. Southampton would only have 1. Our recommendation would be twofold, and there's another piece to this that I'll cover in a minute. So, 2 days to make up. Our recommendation would be that we let staff propose how to use one of those days. This is actually what we did last year. They can submit a proposal to their administrator for how they will utilize those 7 hours prior to June 30th. So that might be, it gives them some flexibility. So I might propose that I want to work with my 6th grade team on developing a curricular unit for the upcoming school year. Or Christina might propose that she wants to read a professional book that has come out in her field. Or Leslie might propose that she wants to go to a workshop that's happening after school ends.
She wants to go to the bar.
It's also called a
That's her
that proposal would not be approved. But we
For the
do,
record.
again, it honors sort of their professional needs and gives them some autonomy to decide what works best for them, subject to the approval of their administrator. The second day would still be a day where all staff come together, and we would propose that be Tuesday the 20th, which gets to the second part of my proposal. So Juneteenth was adopted as a federal holiday last year. It happened well after our calendar was set and still played into the end of our school year. It is still a federal holiday, though it is not a recognized state holiday in New Hampshire. It is in the Department of Education calendar for the upcoming school year, so when we look at next year's calendar, we will revisit that conversation. Though it, as of right now, is still after school is projected to end for students. So we would propose that for year-round employees, that Juneteenth be a holiday for them. For our school year employees, it isn't relevant because they have a work year that is still a set number of days. So again, by giving our teachers and the flexibility to use the 19th at their discretion, it meets that need without extending the year beyond the 20th. That was a lot of information, but so if it wasn't clear, please ask.
So across all districts, all students will be done before the weekend.
Correct.
And with the 2 remaining days that have to be made up, one is essentially a floating day, for lack of a better term, and the other would be on the Tuesday.
Correct.
You're proposing.
Thank you for that summary.
You're welcome.
I filled in with all of the backstory,
I had
so
a
that was
little-
much more clear.
You had a little.
Well, we went over to
Yeah.
operations committee, so I had some time to wrap my head around it.
Got it.
Motion to accept the superintendent's recommendation.
But anyway,
I didn't mean to push
there
you.
we go, we're good, keep going.
Unless anybody does have a question, then by all
Any
means.
other
This does satisfy Hampton Falls' extra day situation.
Yes.
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 Okay.
Students will still meet the hours, and so staff would still have the additional.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before we approve the Southampton meeting.
No, we'll be on the 15th, right?
For students and staff would still finish, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure you don't want us to move it extra day?
We officially vote as a board, like our own.
Correct. You still will at a board level set your own calendar, but because of the impacts SAU-wide and the flexibility for staff for that additional day, I wanted to say this collectively.
Okay.
Awesome. So glad the kids don't have to go back after the weekend.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
Yes,
I'm
okay.
happy
Guarantee
I'm
half
happy
of
for
you
the
show up.
teachers that the kids don't have to go back
That's
and
right.
that next day, 'cause it's like you said, it's very hard to, I'm sure, bring them in, you know?
Very hard.
So are we just
We're
voting
making
for
anyone
the
like-
June 19th piece, and each board will still vote individually at their boards for the last day?
On the end of calendar.
Yeah.
They still have to vote at their individual boards, but this would allow us to earlier communicate the direction that we're leaning in,
Okay.
and might solve the growing number of questions we're receiving on a regular basis about when school ends.
Leave me alone. And then everyone is starting and
I'm just
ending
trying
at
to
the.
make sure I have this correct. Okay.
Yeah, maybe it's subject to, accept the superintendent's recommendation, subject to adoption at an
Okay.
individual board meeting.
What she said.
You've got
Yeah.
that?
That's what I
said. Perfect.
Okay.
Except to, yep, that.
So you made a motion, do we need a second?
Made a motion.
I'll
We
second
had a
it.
second over there.
Oh, I have
Leslie,
Christina and
yeah.
Leslie already.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
She's
Way ahead.
We're ready. She's already ahead of it.
All right, next.
Unanimous.
Look at us, unanimous.
All right. Next, you good, Rhonda?
Yes.
All right, next ticketed item here. Yes.
Okay, next ticketed
Proposed
item.
donation.
So, I want to thank
Amazing.
Leslie for introducing us to these folks from the Brook. Matt and I had a few meetings with the folks there. Leslie was present for the first one to introduce us. But the Brook, is everyone familiar with what the Brook is?
Oh, yeah.
I just.
So-
So I've been there, done that.
Is that where you take your professional
I was just,
development?
Work session.
Work session.
Not helping me.
Sorry.
Sorry. We'll behave.
Focus, Jen.
So through our conversations with the Brook, they have offered to essentially continue to support, starting with a one-year donation of $115,000, but they would guarantee additional support for that. They hope to link us up with some community partners to help continue that funding through a 501c3. But they're very focused on supporting mental health. That's an area they deal with a lot with their employees as well, and they certainly understand the impact of mental health as parents and employees. So we had some conversations with principals, with our central office team about how we might utilize that role, and settled on the idea of an SAU-wide social work position. We don't have Seabrook and Winnacunnet, our larger districts, have social work positions embedded in their schools. We don't have that capacity in our smaller schools, but it's not that we don't have that need. And so this would give us some flexibility to stretch those resources into the smaller schools, as well as to support those families who have students up here at the high school, but maybe have younger siblings in our other buildings, just makes smoother connections for us. We also think it will connect well with a position that we're going to talk about a little bit later, a grant-funded position, the early intervention outreach specialist, so that those positions can kind of complement each other. You know, there's clearly a need. Our hope would be that this position works, you know, not necessarily the school day hours, but has some flexibility to be available into the afternoon and evening, to be able to connect with students who are attending the evening school, for example, to be able to potentially offer, you know, some meetups or workshops for parents in the afternoon or evening. But again, to be a resource to children and our families across the SAU, and work in partnership with the Seabrook social workers, with the high school social worker, and the early intervention specialist, along with the professionals in our schools who also actively support student mental health and well-being. So it's an exciting opportunity, in my opinion.
I have a question. Would it be something that, for me in my brain, when I'm working through mental health and that impact on kids, it seems like access to things like therapy and those things are hard for everyone, especially the youth. I mean, it's like trying to find a therapist for a child or a middle school or high school age kid is really hard. And I wonder if there is a piece of this that could be geared more towards that part, rather than, because there are social workers, I mean, I know that there are needs for that as well in the smaller districts, but I wonder if there's more of a, like an overarching theme when it comes to what really we can do for mental health in the now, and how that then affects all the districts, and, you know, especially just for me in my brain is what I'm just wondering with therapy and things like that.
So adding one mental health clinician would not be adequate, I don't think, to support that need. But adding one person who can help make the connections to mental health clinicians, right? Whether telehealth or in person, who can work with our area agency, right, Seacoast Mental Health, who can help us with Seacoast Youth Services for people who may have substance use issues, who can connect us with the Parent Resource Center that's located in Portsmouth, who can help pull those pieces together. I think right now that's our greatest need.
Gotcha.
I don't dispute that we have lots of people who need those mental health connections, and our counselors manage lists of those resources, but the challenge is supporting families to make those connections with those resources to access the support and keep it moving forward.
Makes sense.
Sorry. Can I ask a budget question? Because I'm on my town's budget committee, and I know this is going to come up at some point. Matt, where does this fall on a budget? Like, so it's not part of next year's budget, right? But it's a person employed through the district, but it's not on our individual school budgets.
No, so it'll be in the SAU budget.
It's in the SAU budget.
Employee.
Okay.
Similar to the ESOL.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. All I need to know.
Yeah. But it did say in the partnership proposal that it would be that they would put up X amount, and then in turn hope that the school would try
well, so
to put up the rest.
that would be my budget committee's next question if it was on our budget. So what happens if the Brook goes out of business, God forbid, but what happens and they're not able to fulfill said grant then the following year, whose responsibility is it now that we have a full-time employee?
Yeah, I mean, like any other position, right, it's up to us whether we continue that position or
eliminate it.
Okay. You know, I can tell you from our discussions that they have funded like positions in other places in the country and continue to support those positions and have been fortunate to attract partners who help channel donations.
That's nice.
To those.
No, I'm Huge. Just, you know, my budget committee has questions.
100%.
And I'm the only one there.
One small additional, I'm just kind of, in my brain, trying to wrap around whether this would be, fall under sort of the special services or the counseling services wing. Perhaps it crosses both, but, funding, there's a lot of different funding streams for those different disciplines. Do you have a vision of where it might lie with regard to one of those?
So within the SAU budget, there really isn't that huge
Right.
distinction. It does cross both. I think we would see it as a general ed expense, essentially, similar to ESOL.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Who would that position report up through then?
So Dr. Toomey oversees our other social work, mental health, counseling, and special education. It's under the same umbrella, but even though it's in different buckets.
Great. Make a motion that we accept the donation from the Brook.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I think
Yes.
your motion is a little bit more in-depth than that.
All right, hold on.
Yeah, I know, we've been loose on the motions here.
I need a motion to hold a public hearing at the May 24th joint board meeting on the
The acceptance.
acceptance, I could accept, on the acceptance of a donation in the amount of $115,000 from the Brook in order to hire a full-time social worker for the SAU 21 school districts.
My heart still stands.
Just one clarification. So we're asking you to accept this tonight so that we have the opportunity to post the position now, and then with the intent to accept the donation on May 24th and bring you a nomination at the May 24th meeting so that we can have someone ready to start. Okay.
Yeah, so add that into that whole
Okay.
like thing.
Yeah.
That's just clarity.
Perfect. All in favor?
Okay.
Okay.
Can I make a request? Can we do the personnel one now? If there's a vote, I just have to leave at 8.
Sure. Yes. Any problems with that, anyone?
Nope.
That means we have to go to non-public.
So.
Okay.
Wow.
We do. Okay. Now we just have to take a roll call to enter non-public session
Need
under
a
our.
motion first.
Sorry.
Motion to enter
Some-
non-public under RSA 91A3 2B.
Second.
Okay, let me catch up to you guys.
Yeah. Do we need to be on?
Barbara?
I'm sorry.
Anthony?
Yes.
Jill?
Yep.
Lisa?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Danielle?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Christina?
Yes.
Lauren?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yeah.
Leslie?